Oil is the excrement of the devil. El excremento del diablo.
Oil is black blood.
Oil is the blood of the dinosaurs.
This is the bloodstream of the world economy.
Oil is the blood of the earth. We're moving from an era of cheap, abundant energy to an era of scarce, hard-to-get, expensive energy.
At the same time, we are making ourselves dependent on some extremely unstable regimes in some very nasty parts of the world.
Keeping the world dependence on oil as long as possible is important.
Not 1 in 50, not 1 in 100 of the people in our country have any inkling of the potential problem that we're facing.
Increased unemployment, poverty, bankruptcy, starvation. There are all kind of the things that happen when a society collapses.
So we enter an entirely new world of quite unbelievable dimensions, and yet it's only a few years away.
Hello, folks. I'm a carbon atom, and since I'm an essential part of each of the hydrocarbons in crude oil, I'm here to give you the inside dope on gasoline.
Oil is not like wheat. We are not growing it every year. Oil is the outcome of many millions of years of geological history.
The great bulk of the world's oil was formed at just two very brief moments of extreme global warming 90 and 150 million years ago.
Animals and plants that died in the ocean were compressed by more deposits of sand. And over the years, these deposits squished and compacted more and more. And then over time, they were cooked, which was what we call the kitchen.
And when the organic material was buried to a depth of about 2,000 meters, chemical reactions converted it into oil. This was formed once, briefly, over geological time. And so we're using this stuff up over 1 or 2 centuries.
One barrel of oil, the refined product of which 42 gallons of gasoline you can buy for a little over $100, will produce as much energy, as much work as you will get from 12 people working all year for you.
Take an average man performing physical labor for 25,000 hours to produce the amount of energy that's contained in that 1 barrel of oil. That barrel of oil, if it's pulled out of the ground in Iraq, can be pulled out of the ground for $1. You invest $1 and you get back 25,000 hours of human labor. That's an energy source that is so dense, it's essentially free energy.
It's all non-renewable, it's all extremely capital intensive, and it's probably the most invaluable raw natural resource we've ever discovered.
You are about to know the thrill of seeing that which has never been seen before. You are about to enter a beautiful, exciting, wonderful new world, the world of 1960. For the first time in history, you'll see a wonderful new world of Fords.
Fine cars the last word in wish it were mine. Cars the dream car of the wonderful new world of Fords.
The 1960 Thunderbird.
Oil is our God. I don't care if somebody says they worship Jesus, Buddha, Allah, whoever. They actually worship petroleum.
%70 of the barrel of oil is refined into transportation fuels, which include motor gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, railroad fuel, and maritime fuel. 98% of all transportation energy comes from oil.
Construction of an average car consumes somewhere between the energy equivalent of 27 and 54 barrels of oil, depending on whose statistics you use. A computer, the construction of the average desktop computer consumes 10 times this weight in fossil fuels. A microchip consumes 630 times this weight in fossil fuels during its construction. For every calorie that you eat in the United States, and probably a similar number in other industrialized nations, requires 10 calories of hydrocarbon energy.
There are 6.4 billion people, I think, living on the planet now. Most of them are reasonably well fed, and that's a consequence of what was called the Green Revolution in the second half of the 20th century. The Green Revolution consists in very large measure of fertilizing land with petrochemicals, fertilizers that are derived from petroleum.
Farming has changed more in the last 50 years than it did in the previous 1,000. A farmer today can work 5 times the land his father worked and still have time for leisure that his father never knew. The petroleum that runs these modern hired hands has not confined progress in farming to the fields. Life is easier for the farm wife, too. What it comes down to is that the oil industry has to please Mrs. Martin and millions just like her. Already today, she's used some 87 petroleum products, including the plastic bacon wrapper and the wax of the milk carton. She'll top 100 before the day is over.
The liquids that come out of oil as it's processed and refined create the building block for all of our petrochemical, chemical, plastics, pharmaceutical, these, zillions of things.
Fires, insecticides, cosmetics, weed killers, a whole galaxy of things to make a better life on Earth. And it isn't just oil companies that try to outdo each other, competing for the customer's dollar. The same story is true of almost every successful business enterprise on the whole planet.
Well, whether you know it or not, every single preparation on this beautiful lady's dressing table, every single thing she is wearing is influenced by oil. Just for fun, let's take away all these articles dependent upon petroleum. Her hand mirror, cosmetics, perfume, and manicure set made of plastics. Her synthetic silk negligee, her silk under... Oh, science can go no further.
Значит, Россия вышла на первое место по добыче нефти. Например, если во всем мире в 1901 году, как раз в этот период, значит, Россия вышла на первое место по добыче нефти. И 95% российской нефти давал Баку. Эшелоны с бакинской нефтью шли туда, на фронт. Шли на фронт.
Первоначально здесь добывалась самая максимальная нефть. Здесь было добыто около 5000 тонн нефти.
В 2020 году к этому времени Баку был одним из крупных промышленных нефтяных центров.
Where is Daddy, Mommy?
Well, Jeff, I'll just show you. We're here in the United States. And Daddy is down here in Venezuela. Here where the Lake Maracaibo oil fields are. That's where Daddy is working, Jeff. And when he finds a place for us to live, we're going down there too.
Venezuela discovered oil at the beginning of the 20th century. The real first discovery was about 1914.
The real turning point was on the 16th of December 1922 when there was a blowout in a well that was being drilled at Cabimas. It became known as the Day of the Black Rain. 150,000 barrels in the air for 2 or 3 days running. And that put Venezuela on the world oil map once and for all.
And at one time, Venezuela became the largest exporter in the world.
It was the United States, not Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, that was the world's leading producer of oil. And in fact, much of our military and industrial might arose out of our giant oil industry.
We were essentially the Saudi Arabia of the world up until about the 1950s.
McCamey was a boom town for many, many years. Their attitude was that this was going to last from now on. I know that those people then could not foresee you were ever going to pump all the oil out of the ground in this part of Texas. And they couldn't picture ever running out of oil because it was everywhere and got on everything. Of course, now we realize that you're going to deplete your supply sooner or later. They're not making a lot of dinosaurs anymore.
Oil is a magnet for war. Oil starts wars. The Sudan, for example, Darfur, what everybody is treating as an ethnic and a religious struggle is in fact in part a struggle about major oil finds located in the south, which means that the government in the north, a different ethnic and religious makeup, is displacing those people and moving them out of the area so that those oil revenues belong to them. Oil has always been associated with war. Our very first wars, World War I, World War II, have very important elements of oil in them as a reason for the war, as allowing the war to go on, as a way of securing supply.
Она малосернистая, да, малопарафинистая, она буквально без какой-либо обработки заливалась в танки.
During the 70s, there were the political problems, the war between the Egyptian and the Israelis, in which the oil boycott took place.
Khomeini's revolution, we have the Palestinian problems. Wars between Iraq and Iran.
The first war that was absolutely about oil was Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, which was really about seizing an oil field.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Iraq oil is a giant that has been kept dormant for so many, many years. This oil has been the least explored, the least developed, and the least produced.
There are lots of people who will tell you that oil had nothing to do with the war if you go to Washington. And we used to call it the O word that nobody would say. But in fact, all evidence points to the fact that the United States, which did not secure areas of weapons of mass destruction, but did in fact secure the oil fields, the United States had plans to bring in U.S. companies in Iraq where they have previously not been allowed to operate, that there were maps of the oil fields involved in the planning of the war, that in 1998, long before the war, people were arguing for this as a way of securing energy supplies in the United States.
I can't get inside their heads to know all of the rationale for going to war in Iraq, but there are many people who believe at least a part of the reasons for being there is the geopolitical position of Iraq and the fact that it sits right in the middle of the world's oil patch.
The Iraqis wanted to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And they were happy that the Americans helped, but look at what happened. After Saddam Hussein, there is no institutions, there is no state, there is no army, there is no real police force. People are kidnapped, killed, decapitated, everything. There is no law. They made the country stateless without a state. Instead of creating conditions for peace, they are making conditions for conflict.
More and more oil is going to come from less and less stable places, less and less secure places, places that actually challenge the taking of oil in the first place. Oil fuels war, it's a catalyst for war, it's something that prolongs war, it intensifies war. This is not a pretty picture.
I suppose that the classification of reserves depends on the motivations of the person that's classifying them.
Sort of keep people guessing in a way, keep them off balance. Most numbers that you will see around the world that lead to these numbers that we were talking about include proven plus probable, and sometimes even possible.
In fact, the public data is extremely misleading and misunderstood. OPEC exaggerated how much oil it's got left for all sorts of political reasons.
You know, this is an old story, casting doubt on the numbers of reserves in the Middle East as published.
In 1985, Kuwait overnight added 50% to its reserves. At that time, the OPEC quota, that is the amount of oil that each of the OPEC countries could produce, was based on the reported reserves. So the more you reported, the more you could produce. 2 years later, Venezuela doubled its reserves overnight, and that caused the other countries, finally Saudi Arabia, to announce enormous increases overnight, simply to protect their production quota. And these numbers have not changed since. And it's absolutely implausible to imagine that the number should stay the same when they're all the time producing.
I've asked them that same question. You know, you produce 8 or 9 million barrels of oil a day, and at the end of the year, the reserves are the same as they were, you know, at the beginning, as the same as they were 10 years ago. I said, well, that's our plan. That's our plan. You know, we produce this oil, and we prove up reserves to offset the oil that we've produced during the year. So at the beginning of the next year, our reserves are exactly what they were, you know, the year before. Well, whether you believe that or not, I don't know, but that's what they say. That's what they say. It's their plan. That's the way it works.
OPEC countries do not care about what might happen from now, 20 years from now, or 30 years, or 40 years from now. They care about what they get now, today. Because these are politicians, they want more money to spend, rationally or irrationally, whatever it is, but they have budgets, and they became prisoners of their budget. What may happen 20 years from now, by that time they are dead. They don't care.